Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Theology Thursday, where we try to tackle some theological questions like women in ministry. If you didn't catch that one the last 4 weeks, that's been very interesting. But there is a topic which you might at first think, why are you talking about this on Theology Thursday? Don't you guys just deal with theology? And trust me, there's a little bit of theology in this question. Tell us what we're talking about today.
It's the elephant in the room, really. We have touched on this before on Theology Thursday, but I think we need to look at it again, maybe from a slightly different angle. There's a major virus that is sweeping across the world and infecting lots of people in evangelical churches.
Oh,
it's an infodemic.
Oh, not the pandemic. It was a pandemic of information.
It's an insidious problem, and we need to play some sort of a part in slowing its spread. I'm not talking about COVID, obviously. What I'm talking about is a new form of addiction as people are fed more and more of the same type of stuff. And it seems a little more extreme every time it comes out. And I'm talking about the range of conspiracy theories.
And of course, the way that Google and Facebook work is on these algorithms that feeds you what you want. Like a little child, if they want ice cream, it's calling out for ice cream, they'll just feed it more ice cream, which is never healthy. In this way too, if you start watching certain conspiracy theories on YouTube or on your Facebook, it will just assume that you're interested in that and give you more. And so the next minute you think there's more out there that's on that particular side of an argument than there is on another side of the argument.
And it's certainly spreading through social media, there's no doubt about that.
And what's particularly concerning, Dave, is that it affects, or should we say infects, a lot of Christians. Like, Christians seem to be particularly susceptible to some of the stuff that's out there right now.
It seems like the boundary between Christianity and conspiracy is quite blurred as far as a lot of people are concerned. No one knows where one starts and the other finishes, really. There are major concerns in Western Australia at the moment, for example, about some of the information that's being passed on to Indigenous communities. And some suggesting that the vaccines implant digital devices or chips to monitor people, or that they contain an enzyme named after Lucifer that would leave people who take the injection with the mark of the beast. And that has resulted in about 7% of the Indigenous population having been vaccinated, way behind the rest of the
And I watched a YouTube clip on this by an electrical engineer, and he said that the smallest microchip that you can get at the moment that could do what they're saying it could do is just a little bit smaller than a grain of rice, and there's no way you can inject that. That's not going to fit through a needle. It's nonsense. If you are watching this, please, it's nonsense. They cannot inject you with some device or some electrical chip that's going to be the mark of the beast. It's not going to happen.
At the more benign end of the spectrum, some are claiming that we should not resist the virus at all because it's part of God's judgment on the world. Dr. Jeffrey Stokes, who's a paediatrician, and her husband is Indigenous, and he's the pastor of an Indigenous church near Kalgoorlie. And
I heard her on the radio yesterday.
She's been criticised by some of the conspiracists for actually promoting vaccines, saying that by encouraging people to get vaccinated, she's condemning them to eternal damnation.
Which, again, is nonsense. Can we just say that the Bible says that judgment is held back until Christ comes again. God is not judging the earth early. He's not jumping the gun and saying, oh, that's it, I'm just going to... This is just a virus. There's been viruses before, and there will be viruses again. And it is behooven to us, Dave, to do whatever we can to fight that virus.
The reality is that the two vaccines on offer at present in Australia are totally different in the way that they're designed and the way that they work, and to suggest that both contain the same Luciferian enzyme or computer chip. I mean, it's quite ludicrous.
It is ludicrous.
And what's more, I think it's actually demeaning to God to suggest that he would look at a multitude of people who have believed in him, received Christ as Saviour, served him faithfully, and then condemn them to hell because they've accepted some sort of vaccine that they thought was good for their health and well-being. That, to me, that's demeaning to the character and nature of God.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a theological issue, if you like, just because it's relating to...
And a form of legalism, Dave, because you're saying that there is something that you can do to earn your salvation, or there's something you can do to lose your salvation, which amounts to the same thing. And so, of course, that is, as you said, that's not theologically sound.
Now, look, I don't want words put in our mouth, but I think everyone should be free to choose to accept or not accept the vaccine. I'm in that camp.
Yeah, me too.
But I accept that whatever choice I make, that is jab or no jab, I have to accept that there will be consequences. If the consequence of a vaccination ends up as a medical reaction, then so be it. That's the choice I've made. I knew of that possibility before I took the vaccine. But likewise, if I refuse, some people or businesses may choose not to allow me to enter their premises, or I may not be able to travel in certain types of transport. That's part of the consequence. It's all to do with our choice. And there is a consequence that goes with every choice.
You know, I was just speaking to somebody last night who was saying it appears that, we're in a generation where more and more people are just looking to avoid responsibility for their decisions. They want to blame somebody. So if they don't get the vaccine and get COVID, they want to blame somebody. If they take the vaccine and there's a reaction to it, then they want to blame somebody. Nobody's willing to say, look, I know what the consequences are, and I choose this path. I suppose what I would say, Dave, is there are reasons why you might choose not to take the vaccine, but can it please leave us out of it? It's nothing to do with the Bible. It's not a theological reason. There is no dark, deep state that's trying to inject you with some sort of devil juice. It's not the way it is. It's just simply a virus that we've got, and we're trying to the whole world is coming together to try to fix this thing.
Although there may even be some validity in the suggestion that when Jesus commanded his disciples to love their neighbours as themselves, getting vaccinated may be a demonstration of that love, because by being vaccinated, I might help to reduce the risk of passing it on to other people, for example. So why are there so many Christians found in the ranks of today's conspiracy theories? Organisations like QAnon, for example, find their strongest support among evangelical
It's embarrassing.
Christians.
And this is where it becomes theological. So I started by saying that, like, why are you talking about COVID-19 on Theology Thursday? And so we did want to address this and make it very clear what we believe is theologically sound, but also we want to show you where these attitudes, where this susceptibility to conspiracy theories came from.
Christians believe that there's more to reality than that which meets the eye. The apostle wrote to an early church community, we live by faith, not by sight. Of course, was Corinthians.
God is invisible. Right.
And Jesus taught his disciples, blessed are those who have not seen yet believed, John 19. Now, I cannot observe or see God as I might a cell under a microscope. I can't put him in a test tube and say, here is God. And so I live by faith or trust in God's previous revelation in history. Now, conspiracy theories come from exactly the same perspective. And so a lot of Christians grab hold of conspiracy theories because they've heard that a good Christian leader supports it, and so it must be correct. Even though I can't prove anything, or at least very little, that the conspiracy happens to propagate, I accept it by faith because I'm conditioned to accept things by faith. And they say, for example, that our lives are controlled by plots hacked in secret places. Although we live ostensibly in a democracy, they say a small group of people runs everything and we don't know who they are. I can't see it, I can't prove it, and so I accept that by faith in the same way that I do my Christian faith. And this is where the line becomes blurred.
Yeah, when you can't physically prove it, you can't put it under a microscope, or you can't point to a group of people, or if you can't prove that's the group of people, they're the secret ones. But where does that thinking where was it birthed? Well, where did it start?
When big events occur, pandemics, recessions, wars, terrorist attacks, we're told by a lot of people it's because this secretive group is working against the rest of us, and they try not to convince us that such things as terrorists and pandemics are actually genuine things. So there are a lot of people that say, well, the pandemic doesn't even exist, COVID doesn't even exist. And one of the main points of view, or at least popular theology that informs that sort of conspiracy model, is the premillennial futurist eschatology, which
we will explain. That's I know those are big words, but this whole concept that this is what we're about to talk about is why Christians seem to be more susceptible than others to the concept of a conspiracy or a deep state.
And it seems to be Christians that are attracted by that particular eschatology or end times doctrine. And that is the Doctrine of Derby, which we'll mention in a minute. But essentially it says that Jesus will come before the millennium and before a great tribulation, and the world is going to get worse and worse, and Christians are going to drop off, and Christ will come back and take a remnant. That's all that's left of faithful Christians on the earth. It's very, very negative theology.
And they can point to verses in the Bible to back that up because they're looking at it through a particular lens. We look at those same verses, and we would both Dr. David and I both would look at those verses and say, no, that's not in the future. That happened. That's referring to the Roman Empire. That John on the Isle of Patmos was warning the Christians in Jerusalem this is the beast with 10 heads is the Roman Empire with its 10 Caesars, starting with Julius Caesar, etc., etc. And that all of those conspiracy theories are based in something that happened 2,000 years ago. That the Bible's pretty clear that of the increase of his government, of Jesus' government, there will be no end. It will keep getting bigger. It's going to keep growing. It's not going to stop. It's not going to be shut down just before Jesus comes again. It says of the increase of his government, there will be no end. That his kingdom will grow to fill the whole earth.
I think a lot of Christians fail to understand that their view on end times actually impacts the way that they think and act now. Some of these beliefs are often reinforced that if they don't accept certain conspiracy theories, then they're obviously out of line with their doctrine, and so they come together, even subconsciously. A lot of Christians don't realise how much it affects. Catastrophic thinking among these premillennial groups has marked history. The Bay of Pigs was the lead up to Armageddon for sure, as was the terrorist attacks on the Olympic Village in 1972 in Munich. There's been the alignment of the planets. Goodness knows, the blood moons. How many times have we gone through the blood moons being the end? The establishment of the EEC, of the EU. This was going to be the 10 states, and of course
the 10 toes of the statue, right?
Out, and the introduction of bank card with cashless purchasing. That was a big one. I was told you can't have a bank card. It's a devil's thing.
Because the 3 Bs look like 3 sixes.
9/11, there was a whole range of conspiracies around that event. The moon landing in '69, barcodes as the mark of the beast, the 5G phone system recently, and of course microchip technology. These have all been subject to conspiracy theories that are very, very negative.
And they're all based on that false understanding that there will be a one world government in the future, whereas we would understand, no, that was in the past. That was the Roman Empire. There'll be a one world government in the future, and they're going to try to get us. And so it's very, very, it's based on fear and causing people to be afraid of what's happening is going to happen in the future. But we have a Bible that says, "Be anxious for nothing." I don't want you to be afraid about anything. There's one verse. Another verse, I have not given you a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. Church, I've read the last page. We win.
Absolutely.
Right? We win. And you know, these things come and go. As Dave just mentioned, a litany of events that evangelicals throughout the last 100 years have thought marked the end times. You know, there's this great tribulation coming.
And all of that really stemmed from Derby, from John Nelson Darby.
John Darby.
Who was the founder of the Plymouth Brethren.
A couple of 100 years ago.
Yeah. In his writings and during his visits to the United States, Darby informed American evangelicals that they had been interpreting the Bible incorrectly. There would be a literal millennium. Now, we take that for granted today, but the reality is the church, down through the years, never believed in a literal millennium.
Yeah, that was news to everybody.
It was. And what's more, he said that Jesus would return to the earth after the millennium. And around the 1900s, some Christians had started to say, well, there will be a physical millennium, but the church will, prior to that, rise up and cleanse the world during this millennium. This was called post-millennial doctrine, so Christ would come at the end of that. It really had a very short life, that doctrine, but some had begun to teach it. So Darby says, oh, no, sure there will be a millennium, but Jesus will return before that, and so Christians can anticipate the second coming at any moment, and at that time they'll be raptured into heaven, and those left behind would face divine judgment. And the consequence of that was to absolve evangelicals of responsibility for addressing social ills, for example. I've had people say, I would not want to do anything that would make the world a better place and postpone the return of Christ. I've actually had them say
completely ignoring the words of Christ that encourage us to be the light of the world, to be the salt of the earth, to make the world a better place. That's what we are called to do, church. That's what we are called to be as disciples, to be like Jesus. We are following him. We want to be just like him. Did he make the world a better place or a worse place? I would put it to you that he made it a much better place.
I think
he brought healing, he brought love, he brought grace. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
He brought hope and goodness into the world, kindness when there was no kindness. He's the one that brought the whole concept of sexual equality between men and women, of children being of equal value to adults, of the slave and master being equal in God's sight. Christ brought all of those thoughts into the world. I would say he's made the world a better place.
I think so.
And we're called to do the same thing.
And because of Darby's teaching, I think a lot of people have focused on looking for the Antichrist rather than the real Christ. Because they find the Antichrist, if they can find him or identify the mark of the beast, that means that Christ's return is imminent, which it is anyway.
And it should be pointed out here, Dave, that in the Bible, Dave speaks fluent Greek. There is no the in front of the word Antichrist. It doesn't say the Antichrist. John Darby put the in there so that we would think it's an individual man who's a baddie who's going to run the world. He's going to be, the Emperor Palpatine of the world.
The Bible talks about antichrists who have gone into the world already.
Yeah.
But that was in John's time.
Exactly. And it's that, and he was talking about an antichrist spirit that resists the kingdom of God. And that's always been there and always will be there. It doesn't come just before Jesus comes. He's always been there. In fact, John said, we are in the last days. For 2,000 years, we've been in the last days.
The philosophy and theology of premillennialism has made easy targets of conspiracy theories, especially those at the moment around COVID-19 that we see across the globe. So Christian leaders saying things, for example, like this. Here's a quote from a Christian leader. This vaccine is from the pit of hell. Don't pray for the vaccines. Don't take the vaccine. They're going to be coming. They're not going to be good. They're not good for you physically and spiritually. Right. They're a setup for what will come later. Now that was by
who would say
Kurt Landy, who's a Christian leader, a radio TV guy, does a lot to promote Israel and so forth, well known around the globe. and they're coming out with those sort of statements.
Ironically, a lot of the people that are particularly evangelical and love Israel as they should. That's all good. I think they missed the fact that Israel is the most vaccinated country in the world. So they're all on board, Come on, guys, get on board with this.
I think I can say with full confidence, and I know you're going to agree with this, Peter, that neither the pandemic nor any of the vaccines have anything to do with the mark of the beast or a new world order.
No, absolutely.
It's got nothing to do.
From a theological point of view, don't bring that into it. Leave us out of this because it's got nothing to do with that. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. There have been viruses before. There will be viruses again.
Well, it's estimated that 200 million cases of polio and measles and mumps, rubella, and rabies, hepatitis A, 450,000 deaths from these diseases was prevented just... These are stats from America, and they say in the US alone between 1963 and 2015, and that was because of vaccination.
Yeah.
Smallpox was one of the world's deadliest and most contagious diseases, but it was eradicated in the 1970s by worldwide vaccinations. Still one of the most incredible feats of science. As a matter of fact, you could not travel without that one.
Yeah, yellow fever, you still can't.
I worked in the immigration department. I could not have my job unless I had the scratch, unless I had that.
So this whole asking people or requiring people to be vaccinated is not a new thing. It's not a new thing.
The COVID-19 pandemic will only be brought under control really when one of two things happen: either enough people around the globe catch the infection and overcome it to create herd immunity, which is a big ask, or a vaccine is accepted by the majority of people on Earth. So development and widespread use of the vaccine can create herd immunity, and it actually, for example, with the measles, it almost wiped measles out by the 1990s. However, in 1998, a researcher named Andrew Wakefield, he published a study that claimed that measles, mumps, rubella, that vaccine, caused the development of autism. Now, that was retracted within months because the scientific community found it to be based on manipulated data, false claims, and fraudulent practice. However, in 2005, a celebrity named Jenny McCarthy picked up on Wakefield's paper as an explanation for her son's autism and started the anti-vaxxer movement. And since then, millions of parents have decided not to vaccinate their children out of fear that they would become autistic. And even though 1,500 studies have proven that there is no link between vaccine and autism, the anti-vaxxer movement has become popular. And since it began, there's been a resurgence of measles, especially threatening young children, the elderly, and those who have been compromised.
Immunocompromised. It has to be said, though, just let me make this absolutely clear, that neither David or I are doctors. And we're not scientists, and we're not virologists, so we want to make it clear that what we do is theology. And so from a theological point of view, there is no reason why you shouldn't take a vaccine. From a pastoral point of view, both of us would say, it's your choice. Do your research. We can't tell you what to do or what not to do. It's your body. There will be consequences either way. There's no putting your head in the sand and getting around this. So from a pastoral point of view, I would agree. From a lay person's point of view, looking at it, I would have to say that I've heard all the conspiracy theories. I've heard the doctors online saying this is wrong. It's we've got a treatment for COVID. There's a lot of doctors in the States online that are saying we can treat COVID. You don't have to take the vaccine. Well, to that, just as a layperson and an observation, as somebody who's trying to think this through, I'd have to say there's also a treatment for malaria. But a lot of people die from it every year because not everyone can get it. So maybe there's a treatment, or maybe they'll have a really great treatment in the future for COVID. But still the way out for the vast majority of the earth is a vaccine, an effective vaccine. So now the pastoral question is, okay, you choose which is an effective vaccine for you. There's several on the market, and
you have to remember, we don't choose whether or not we get the virus. We can choose how much we expose others to it through our behaviour, certainly. And choosing the vaccine, I think we've got to say this, that we've said it, but let's repeat it strongly, that choosing the vaccine is not choosing to identify with and worship anything at all, and cannot have a spiritual implication. The pandemic is a rampant disease. The vaccines are medical, scientific attempts to control its spread. You've got to decide for yourself, but base your decisions, please, on medical advice, not on conspiracy theories.
Absolutely. And can we also say, in the vein of loving your neighbour, that it looks like that even if you're vaccinated, you could still transmit the disease while not as virulent and not as much as an unvaccinated person. It still is possible. So can you not whinge about having to wear masks? It is the best way to protect somebody else. It's not to, they say that masks are as much about not spreading it as it is about not getting it. So it can protect you a little bit, but it protects others a lot. Just in case you had a cold or a flu, put a mask on, just out of courtesy for your family and friends and the people around you. It's not a conspiracy. It's not Big Brother trying to control you. The last time I read, Jesus is on the throne still. Yeah. He's still in control, and he's given medical knowledge to humans to be able to defeat these things and to try to minimize their impact. So
when we get to heaven, when we come to that place, God's not going to look to see if we've got a vaccine certificate. He's only going to look to see if our name's written in the book.
Yeah.
And
not the vaccine book, the book of life.
The book of life. And that's really all that it's about. So none of these things have any effect on our spiritual standing.
Yeah. I remember last year when we were talking about this, Dave, we asked that question. We actually said, look, it's okay to ask the questions. What if it's not real? What if this is what if? I said, but remember, it's also just as important to say, but what if it is real? What if there really is a virus? And what if it is killing millions of people? Shouldn't we do something about that? Yeah. And often we get so one-eyed and that we forget that, if this is real, which we believe it is. I mean, I have friends that have first cousins and actual relatives that have died overseas from this disease. It's happening. It is real. So let's do our best to protect others and to protect Australia. Get back to life as we've enjoyed it for hundreds of years in this nation anyway, and do the right thing, but do it intelligently. Do your research. Talk to your doctor. And make your choice based on science, not on conspiracies. God bless you. Have a great week.
Cheers.